KL Publications presents I Think I Can by Ryan C. Sanders. Changing minds changes everything else. Tony and Rebecca had always seemed like the perfect couple, at least from the outside. They had been together for 3 years, navigating the twists and turns of modern love. Their relationship had plenty of good times, spontaneous road trips, late-night conversations under the stars, and shared dreams of building a future together. But beneath the surface, there was always something more complicated, something neither of them could quite name it, but both could feel. Rebecca had a hard time trusting people, especially in relationships. Her past was dotted with experiences that had shaped her, leaving her cautious and guarded. Her doubts weren't about Tony specifically, but about anyone who tried to get too close. In her mind, every time Tony said something that could be interpreted as negative, her thoughts spiraled. She would replay his words over and over again, searching for hidden meanings. She never said it out loud, but she often wondered if Tony's love for her was as real as it seemed. Tony, on the other hand, was the type of person who wore his heart on his sleeve. He loved Rebecca deeply, and it pained him to see her struggle with trust. Yet he often found himself frustrated by the way she misinterpreted his intentions. It wasn't that he didn't understand where she was coming from. He knew her past had been quite difficult. But sometimes her constant questioning of his motives made him feel like no matter how hard he tried, he could never quite reach her. In the early days of their relationship, Tony tried to be endlessly patient. He would spend hours reassuring Rebecca, walking her through every conversation, explaining what he meant and why. But as time went on, this became exhausting. He wasn't perfect either. Sometimes his tone grew sharp, his words short. He felt drained by constantly having to defend his love. The more he tried to explain, the more Rebecca seemed to doubt. It was a cycle neither of them could break. One day, after an argument that felt too familiar, Tony decided to seek advice. A friend recommended a book called Mind Wise by Nicholas Epley, which explored how easily people misunderstood each other's thoughts and intentions. Tony wasn't much of a reader, but something about the idea of learning how to better understand Rebecca intrigued him. He picked it up that evening and began to read. As Tony delved into the book, something clicked. Epley's theory that we are all mind readers resonated with him. People often believe they know what others are thinking, but more often than not, they're wrong. Tony realized that he and Rebecca had been stuck in a pattern of assuming the worst in each other. Rebecca's doubts weren't about Tony. They were about her own fears. And his frustration wasn't because she didn't love him, but because he was afraid he wasn't good enough to break through her walls. The key insight that hit Tony hardest was the idea that the way we perceive others often dictates how they show up in our lives. If Rebecca saw him as untrustworthy, that's how she would continue to interpret his actions. Likewise, Tony realized that he had started seeing Rebecca as someone who would never fully trust him, and that expectation had shaped their interactions. Both of them were stuck in unproductive thought patterns, creating a self-fulfilling prophecy. Determined to change, Tony sat Rebecca down for an honest conversation. This time, instead of defending himself or trying to explain away her doubts, he told her about the book. "Rebecca," he began, "I think we've been seeing each other through lenses that isn't quite accurate. I've been assuming that you'll always doubt me, and I think you've been assuming that I'm going to hurt you, even if I don't mean to. But what if we're both wrong? What if we tried to see each other differently on purpose?" Rebecca listened, her defenses slowly lowering as Tony spoke. She had never heard him talk this way before, with such clarity and vulnerability. For once, it didn't feel like he was trying to fix her or their relationship. It felt like he was offering a solution they could build together. "I don't want to doubt you," she said softly, "but sometimes I can't help it. It's like my brain gets stuck in a loop. and I can't break free. I don't want to feel this way. I know, Tony replied, but maybe we can both try something different. From now on, let's make a pact to consciously change the way we see each other. Instead of expecting the worst, let's choose to believe the best. I'll try to be more patient when you're struggling in those areas. And maybe you can try to believe that I really am here for you. Not just say it, but really believe it. Rebecca hesitated, but then nodded. I'll try, she said. I love you, Tony. I really do. I just don't always know how to show it without my thoughts getting in the way. They agreed to give it a shot. For the next few weeks, they practiced their new approach. Wherever Rebecca's doubts started to creep in, she consciously reminded herself of Tony's love. Instead of replaying old arguments or questioning his motives, she focused on the moments when he had shown her care and devotion. Tony, in turn, worked on staying present. When Rebecca had a hard day, he reminded himself that her doubts weren't about him, they were about her past. He responded with calmness, not frustration. It wasn't easy at first. There were still moments of tension, still times when Rebecca's worries flared up or Tony's patience wore thin and participated in name-calling. But slowly things began to shift. Rebecca found that the more she chose to see Tony as trustworthy, the more his actions aligned with that belief. And Tony noticed that when he stopped expecting Rebecca to doubt him, she seemed to doubt him less. One evening, they were sitting on the couch, wrapped in each other's arms. Rebecca looked up at Tony, her eyes softer than he had seen in a long time. You know, she said, I think I finally understand what you were saying. It's like the way I look at you is changing, and because of that, everything feels different. Tony smiled and kissed her on the forehead. I think we both changed, he said. We're finally seeing each other for who we really are, not for who we're afraid the other person might be. From that moment on, their relationship blossomed in a way neither of them had expected. The blocks in perception that had once kept them apart were gone, replaced by a deeper understanding and trust. By consciously changing how they saw each other, they had transformed their love. Their journey wasn't perfect. No relationship ever is. But Tony and Rebecca had learned that love isn't about never having doubts or fears. It's about choosing every day to see the person you love with fresh eyes. And in doing so, they discovered that when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at truly do change. Thank you for listening. Please subscribe.